Richard Dawkins has for a very long time been the most famous atheist on planet Earth. Obviously, he's written extensively about why Christianity and Judaism and Islam and all religions are wrong. He's written about the so-called God delusion, this idea that a belief in a higher power is in fact a delusion, but he has simultaneously called himself a cultural Christian. So here he was on LBC talking about his views of cultural Christianity.
Well, I must say I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
Okay, but we have substituted an alternative religion, and that religion is paganism, because the reality is that when you cut off a civilization from its Judeo-Christian roots, what you end up with is a paganistic replacement for that religion. Humanism devolves into paganism pretty quickly, because all of the central premises of humanism, things like reliance on human reason, make an argument for human reason as an independent force. You cannot, from an evolutionarily biological perspective, you can't. You can say that human beings are capable of using their brains in order to adapt to their environment. You cannot say that human beings are capable of searching for truth. There is no such thing as truth in evolutionary biology. There's just what's effective and what's not effective. Everything is utilitarian in nature. You can't make the case for higher concepts like justice or freedom if you are operating from a non-God-based universe. You might be able to live that way individually. You can be like Richard Dawkins and be an atheist and be a cultural Christian. But you cannot separate the church building that he is praising there off from what goes on inside the church. The church building is an outward manifestation of the soul that is the church. The same thing is true of our civilization. Our civilization is built in a particular way on particular frameworks and foundations. And when you destroy those foundations and frameworks, what you end up with is secularist pursuit of values that ends up undermining itself and eating itself. You end up with postmodernism. The reason that postmodernism is a natural outgrowth is because it is a natural decay. You go from a thriving civilization, an Enlightenment civilization that was in fact rooted in Judeo-Christian values. This is why, for example, when it comes to capitalism, Adam Smith wrote Theory of Moral Sentiments before he wrote Wealth of Nations. Theory of Moral Sentiments is an entire book about virtue and the necessity thereof. And then he wrote Wealth of Nations, which was predicated on the idea that when you have a civilization that does in fact promote virtue, capitalism can thrive. The same thing is true of things like free speech. These all exist on deeper foundations. Those deeper foundations are religious in nature. Trying to separate those off, pretending that they are the natural state of the world, is historically ignorant. History is in fact contingent. The Enlightenment rests on Christian bases. Pretending that it does not means that you end up severing the two. And an Enlightenment severed from its Christian bases ends in terror. It actually ends in gulags and death camps. The cost of living has already increased 17% this year. It continues to rise despite interest rate controls. As our national debt continues to skyrocket, you need to be confident in the financial services companies you work with, especially regarding your future and your money. Birch Gold is a proven industry leader you want on your side. They demonstrate how precious metals investments can fortify your lifestyle and retirement even in turbulent economic times. Birch Gold understands that navigating financial decisions can be daunting. That's why their expertise, coupled with their customer care process, ensures that your purchase or IRA setup is a breeze. If you're considering converting an existing retirement account into a precious metals IRA, their dedicated in-house IRA department is there to guide you every step of the way, making the process feel as simple as a walk in the park. Birch Gold values your questions and concerns. Their team is always available to provide answers and clarity, whether it's about fees, taxes on rollovers, or the timing of the process. They're here to ensure you feel heard and informed. Text BEN to 989898 to talk to one of Birch Gold's experts and claim your free info kit on gold. You'll learn how to convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. The best part is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Just text BEN to 989898. That's BEN to 989898. This is the point that Nietzsche was making near the end of the 19th century. He was making the case that when you kill God, you don't, in fact, end up with a higher secular humanism. You end up with a pagan pursuit of power. You end up with the pursuit of the Ubermensch because you live in a cold, meaningless universe in which will is the only thing that matters. Power is the only thing that matters. This is why the arguments that are currently made about how, for example, freedom of speech is just a guise for power. This is the argument the left makes against freedom of speech. Property rights are not about the natural outgrowth of human beings want to create and to cultivate. They are, in fact, an imposition by a powerful cadre of people who are attempting to victimize you. They are bad. They're a tool of the patriarchy. Those ideas are natural outgrowths of severing natural law. That's a natural outgrowth of suggesting that the universe is, in fact, not ruled by a creator who created a human nature, and that human nature has natural consequences like property rights, or should have those natural consequences. That the freedom of the mind that is guaranteed by Genesis 1:27, where it says we're all made in the image of God, meaning that we are creative and capable of will, that when you cut that off, you end up with everything is just power dynamics and power relations. As a civilization, you cut yourself off from your roots, and what you end up with is Scotland passing laws suggesting that you cannot speak freely on matters of whether a man is a woman or not. And whoever is in power gets to cudgel the other side. That's the natural consequence. So, people have asked me many times, can there be a moral atheist? Sure, there can be a moral atheist. Can there be a system built on atheism that is moral? No, there cannot. There cannot be a civilizational system built on atheism. This is why when Richard Dawkins says he's a cultural Christian, the question that we should all be asking ourselves is twofold. One, is he right that our civilization rests on Christian foundations? And the answer is yes, of course he is right about that. The second question we should ask is, then why are we destroying those Christian foundations? If the church building exists but there's nobody inside, how long do you expect the civilization to thrive? If the civilization built on the Bible discards the Bible, how long do you expect that civilization to continue along the lines it has previously continued? And the argument by Dawkins and other atheists presumably will be, yes, but all that's untrue. Those would be necessary myths, but they're necessary myths, but they're myths. And so truth matters more. So first of all, I would ask, how are you defining truth? Because according to, again, folks like Richard Dawkins, and again, I like a lot of Richard Dawkins' work. It's really interesting. But according to folks like Richard Dawkins, when he says, we can't believe the Bible because it's not true, my question is, what in evolutionary biology suggests that truth is of any paramount value? If, in fact, he's a specialist in adaptation and the necessity of adaptation, then he should be a believer in the Bible simply on the adaptability basis of it. He should be a Christian because it is useful to be a Christian. Because that's what evolution says. Evolution is all about utility. Evolution is not about fundamental truth. But he says you have to discard the Bible because it is, quote unquote, not fundamentally true because you can't prove the miracles. You can't prove God. Okay, but in what world, in your world, why does truth with a capital T matter? It shouldn't. You live in evolutionary meme land, right? The basic idea that genes are self-replicating and seek to survive. And all of that is predicated on a notion of adaptability and utility. It is not predicated on a notion of truth. So you can't rely upon my religious notions of truth in order to knock out the Bible. Number two, why exactly shouldn't it be true? If it is proved that Western civilization is in fact the highest form of civilization that man has experienced, and it is rooted in Christian and Judaic values, there are two possibilities. One, it's a necessary myth, a Platonic necessary myth. And two, is maybe there's truth to it. Maybe it's true. And maybe it seems that while people like Richard Dawkins can individually reject the premises of the Bible while accepting the conclusions, maybe it turns out that the vast majority of the population cannot and should not. Maybe it turns out that we need more Christians going to church, and we need more Jews going to synagogue. Maybe that's actually really important to a civilization. Otherwise, you end up in the muck that we currently find ourselves. What I would say to Richard Dawkins is, if you like the Christmas carols, someone needs to believe in Christ to sing them. If you like the churches, somebody has to go to church to actually maintain the church. If you like the civilization in which you live, somebody's got to maintain those biblical roots. Somebody's got to go to the garden and cultivate and guard it. It's pretty important. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.